Hey yo. Hey yo. Hey, yo.
Feels fair across the industry. This is something that has been going on for over 100 years in the coffee industry, uh, but but we use this at the end of the process as a way to kind of evaluate in a consistent fashion our final roast profiles. So I use it at the beginning to taste how the green coffee tastes when it's coming in before I've purchased it. I use it during the process of developing a roast profile so that I can taste each profile against one another. And then we again use it at the end of the process, which we are at right here, as we're about to premiere the spring blend. So this gives me an opportunity to finalize the tasting notes on the coffee and make sure that I'm happy with the final product before it hits you guys.
Perfect. So we're getting in the chat that the sound is on right now.
Great.
Again, going back to what I said when I didn't have sound, this is our first time doing this, and I am an English major, so I'm not technically qualified to be doing anything today. But I realized that I had it on mute, which is a rookie mistake.
Well, you learn.
You do. You
But
live
we're
and you
here.
learn.
Everyone's got it now.
Okay. So we've got about 6 people in here right now. I'm not sure what it looks like on Facebook, but I will be monitoring the actual YouTube chat.
Mhm.
So if you purchase the live stream Spring Blend sample to cup along with us, that is where, this is where you need to be, on YouTube. If you have any questions about what Matt's about to walk through, we'll go through the different equipment needed just to make sure everyone can check off.
Mhm.
But please make sure that as we go through each step of this, if you do have questions, to let us know. You are probably I'm probably prematurely tipping this off here, but once we start the actual cupping, it is a very time-sensitive process.
It is somewhat time sensitive at a
Yeah.
few points, and I'll make sure to let you guys know. Once we get the water steeping and diffusing in, that's when we're going to have a timer going, and
Okay.
I won't slow down at that point. But in the meantime, if you have questions, have Kelly toss them at me. But I'm just going to get going if that works for you guys.
Okay, so we're going to start
Great.
with basically just a rundown of the equipment, if that's okay.
Yeah, this is everything you're going to need to go through the process if you're following along right now. I've got a water kettle. We use multiples of each one because coffee is an agricultural product that's not perfectly uniform from bean to bean. So this kind of helps compensate for the fact that there's going to be a little bit of inconsistency. So we'll have 3 cups, ideally the same size. They don't have to be. We're going to weigh everything with our scale, and that is going to ensure that we are extracting everything as uniform as possible by creating a specific ratio of coffee to water in each of these cups. So you can use different size cups as long as you have the scale and you weigh the coffee and the water as you're pouring. That will be how you rinse the spoon in between each sip of the sample. That will make sure we're not getting any contamination from one cup to the other. It's especially important when you have multiple coffees to evaluate because cross-contamination can definitely happen. When you're thinking about coffee and evaluating it in this sensitive environment, it's very easy for one thing to influence the other. So we try to avoid that. We try not to talk about other coffees at the same time. We've got our grinder here. We're going to be grinding each cup right before we brew or diffuse the coffee into the water. The reason for that is just to keep it as fresh as possible. Let's see. You guys will want to be grinding. It's tough. We actually use software that can evaluate grind particle distribution size, and that's kind of how we dial in our grinders. But for your sake, as long as you're doing it consistently, you can at least see from cup to cup the differences. So I am for kind of a table salt, just somewhere on you're just slightly larger than your average Morton table salt, smaller than the coarse stuff. So that's what we're going to be aiming for there. Obviously, we have our coffee sample. We're going to be dosing out into the cups very shortly, and then a couple spoons. These are cupping spoons. There's nothing special about them. We use essentially soup spoons. They're round. They're easy to slurp from. Slurping is really important during this process because the aspiration atomizes the coffee itself and allows volatiles to reach your olfactory system more efficiently and allows you to smell the coffee as well as retronasally olfact the coffee more efficiently. So that's why we use these spoons to slurp out of. And then I've got my phone, which is going to be a timer that we just use to make sure that we're keeping on track for the process, because we're evaluating the coffee not only as it smells dry and as it's brewing, but we'll be evaluating it as it cools off over time, because that matters. As coffees cool off, their imperfections start to show, the coffee changes, and we want to make sure the coffee is delicious at every stage of you drinking it. All right.
Perfect. I think
Any questions at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, so we do have one question. Hold
Sure,
on, let me
go ahead.
get this I brought some Go-Gurt if that's okay.
Fine with
Yeah.
me, Kelly.
Someone said, should we use a standard size grind for pour over, or I guess the
If
question
you do
is
a pour
more-
over, that's a really good place to start. I tend
Okay.
to go, if I'm doing it at home, I tend to go just a teeny tiny bit finer. If I'm using a V60, which is my standard pour over,
Okay.
it's going to be much more fine than for a Chemex.
Okay, cool. Well, that I think is the only question on this side.
Okay.
You know, everyone that's tuned in right now, just make sure you have all of this equipment at home ready to go. Is there any strategy for the layout of this?
You want the coffees that you're going to be evaluating as close to you as possible, obviously because they're the things you need to access the most. Then
Right.
I'm going to have a cup with hot water, so we'll place that right above. The reason we do that is if you were evaluating multiple coffees on the table, each one would have its own cup of hot water in front of it that you would be rinsing the spoon off with in between each coffee.
Okay.
And by having each one individually, that is an additional step to prevent cross-contamination of the coffees.
Cool. Well, I hope that answers your question, Maria. And wow, this is embarrassing. I'm like blown up in the top right corner. Hold up. So we're going to go ahead and move on to basically kind of this step one, which is not just the setup. It's the grind and what the very first like sensorial experience will be, which is the aromatics.
Actually, I'm going to stop you right there. There's
Okay.
one thing even before that.
Oh.
We're going to look at the coffee. I mean,
Oh, we're gonna
that's
look at
a
the
part of your
coffee?
senses. It seems silly, but a part of coffee evaluation is really paying attention to every step. Good coffee is brought about by being incredibly observant of the tiny little details, and the subtleties, and those things all accumulate as you factor them into an improved coffee by paying attention to these things
Gotcha.
at every little step. So yeah, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do is
What would you say, not to cut you off, but what
No,
would
go
you
ahead.
say you're looking for with this type of blend? This is more of like a bright medium blend, right?
Yeah, this is just a little bit lighter than our Soulmate roast, and then some of our single origin stuff. This is a decent bit darker than. You shouldn't get too much bitter roast characteristic from this. You should get more of the sweet, rich, chocolatey body that you get from taking a coffee a little bit darker. That was kind of the goal for this. We wanted something that was still light and refreshing. That's why we chose coffees that I felt like had those characteristics innately, and then took them a little bit darker to kind of balance them out and make them a really like easy brewing but delicate coffee that has some decent body.
Right.
That was the goal anyway, so hopefully
Yeah.
we achieved that, and that's what the purpose of this process is doing.
Yeah, and that's what people tuning in are going to kind of help us decide. if
Yeah,
that's,
actually,
like,
yeah.
what it
So
is.
we haven't actually determined any final cupping notes for this. Obviously, I've tasted the coffees, but the way that you roast the coffee really modulates the way these things taste. So it ultimately hasn't been determined yet.
Cool.
So I'm going to go ahead. The first thing I'm going to do is take my scale, and I'm going to start weighing out coffee for each individual cup. We're going for a 1:18 coffee to water ratio. That's a little bit higher than a lot of people tend to brew with their pour-overs. And the purpose of that is that we're really trying to extract as much solubles as possible out of this coffee. We're not aiming for a delicious coffee on the cupping table. We're aiming to exaggerate any faults or defects that the coffee has. So by increasing that ratio, we're doing everything we can to get as much solubles out of the coffee, not to make the most delicious cup. So for me, these cups, 12 grams of coffee is just right. We use these all the time, so this is something we've already determined. But feel free to just start at 10 grams of coffee to 180 grams of water. That will fit in most coffee mugs. So I'm going to start pouring right now. Okay. Okay, first cup is down.
You mind laying me one out too?
Sure, no problem.
I'd love to cup along.
You may. I have a few extra in there. Normally I just take a spoon, take care of that.
precision here is just impeccable.
Well, obviously everything is imprecise at every step. So if you make an attempt to be as precise as possible, you're mitigating that at least to some degree.
Okay.
Those little imprecisions over time do add up. So. Okay. We have our coffee in there, and you got a good picture of that.
Same person that asked a question earlier, Maria, says she smells chocolate and peanut butter.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, absolutely. You can start evaluating the roast at this point. The bag has gases that have accumulated. Coffee does off-gas and release some volatiles. That's why over time it gets flatter and flatter. Obviously, when you introduce heat energy into a coffee system, it releases a lot more. But pay attention. That's a really great first step, is to immediately start paying attention to what your senses are telling you, and use the vocabulary that you've built around that. You'll start to notice more subtlety as the vocabulary you use builds and you become more familiar with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one more for Kelly over here.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be participating in this live stream as much as I can. Hold on, let me get some Tic Tacs in me, just to kind of cleanse my palate a little bit before. But one thing I will say, I'm the type of person that I need to take notes as I do this type of stuff, because it's a little bit of a sensory overload for me, in the sense that I might taste, like Maria, I might taste chocolate and peanut butter at this step, and then later something else, and if I don't write it down, I'm going to completely forget.
And one thing that might also happen is these flavors, as more aromatics start to come out, they work synergistically with those things, and it can kind of change your perception of them. Things that taste like chocolate, when you add a fruit, might start to taste like the caramelization of the surface of the fruit, and it might totally change how you perceive that. So it's really cool to see how you're experiencing it every step of the level. So we're back to visual cues here. So there's a couple of things. This is a pre-roasted blend coffee of two coffees. This is a couple of our import partners that we're working with. It's an Ethiopian coffee from the Kochera region in Yirgacheffe, Ethiopia. And then we have a Colombian coffee, which is from the plateau just off of the Andes. This is kind of a lesser known region in Colombia for producing coffee, but they're really trying to, our import partner is doing a lot of work into improving coffee quality in that region. That's one of the reasons we like working with them. It's in line with the ethos that we have of our own coffees that we bring in ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So one thing that you can see when you look at the coffee is, one, I just want to see how uniform the roast looks from bean to bean. There's clearly a little bit of difference here. Some of the coffee beans have a smoother surface, and some of the coffee beans have a more craggy surface with a little more color variation. So that's an indication of bean density. The smoother surface means that the coffee has expanded more. Coffee beans, green beans, are small and kind of wrinkly on the surface, and that expansion will cause the surface to grow, and the more it happens, the smoother it becomes, and the larger the coffee bean becomes overall. Another thing you might notice is that little piece of white on some of the beans, or it's kind of a cream color. That's called the silver skin, or the parchment. Sorry, that's not the parchment. The parchment is another part of the coffee bean that is removed. But that's called the silver skin, and it's something that is a tiny, thin little paper that wraps around the coffee bean that usually comes off as the coffee expands and roasts. More dense coffees will hold on and expand less, so that they grab that little bit of silver skin in there. So that's an indication, along with the more variegated color on the surface of the coffee, that coffee bean is a little more dense. So roasting two coffees together that have different densities does present a small concern to me that the development of the coffees has been a little bit different. So it's, again, another really good reason that we'd be tasting these coffees. Any questions about that right now?
Right now, it seems the chat is quiet when it comes to questions.
Great, okay.
Someone says, are those two colors/textures the result of two different sources?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so the Colombian coffee is slightly less dense than the Ethiopian coffee, and the Colombian coffee is the beans that look a little smoother, and the smaller ones with the silver skin in the middle are the Ethiopian beans. That is correct.
Perfect. I have a question for you, Matt.
Yes, go ahead.
So, hold on, sorry. Lost my notes right here. When you're smelling the aromatics here, is there actually like a proper, have we gotten to the smelling, or are you still kind of in the grinding slash
So
evaluation?
I'm just paying,
here?
at this point I'm just paying attention to it.
Okay.
When you first open the bag, you get a little whiff of concentrated aromatics, and it kind of sets the tone. It's the first little bit. I generally begin, if I'm really evaluating a lot of coffees and I want to pay attention, I'm taking notes, I generally begin taking notes once the ground coffee is back in the cup and on the table. We have a time while the water is boiling where we really think about that, because you're going to get a ton of those aromatics that you're already smelling in smaller concentrations that you talked about earlier.
Gotcha. Hold on. There's a follow-up. Do you always roast blends together, or would you roast the two separately and then join them in the bag as a post-roast?
You can do that. We do that sometimes. You run a little bit of a risk of a greater difference in the consistency of the development of those two coffees. So it's very important, if you're doing a post-roast blend, that you mix very, very well. And also, I generally don't do it with lighter coffees, because developing richness in lighter coffees is more challenging. So darker coffees, where solubility differences between the two roast levels is going to be less of an issue. So that's why we do that. This is a little bit lighter. I would prefer that the development on these coffees be more consistent by pre-roasting them.
Perfect. So I think we're all set up to
Are we all
move
set up?
on to.
Okay, great. Yeah. So the next step is going to be we're going to start heating our water up to boil. So that's the next thing. I'm just turning on my kettle.
Okay.
If you've got water on the oven, get that going right now. It's going to take a few minutes, and once you guys have done that, we're going to go ahead and start grinding the coffee. But really quick, once you know you've got your grind setting where you like it, you want to purge just a little bit of coffee through to ensure that any retained coffee grounds in the coffee grinder aren't influencing the taste of the cupping. So that's the first thing I'm going to do.
Gotcha.
Also, one thing that we do before when we grind coffee is we turn the burrs on before we put the coffee in the hopper. There's a really great wealth of information that shows that when the coffee burrs are engaged and there's coffee already in contact with them, the initial bit of coffee that grinds through at the lower RPMs grinds differently than the remainder. So by starting the burrs before I pour the coffee through, what that does is improves uniformity of the grind each time. So I'm going to go ahead and, sorry, do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
Someone said, great explanation on the roasted coffee blend. Who?
Who?
No, like H-O-O-O.
Oh.
..
Thanks, Hugh.
H-O-O-O-O.
Good, I'm
Yeah.
glad that was clear.
Cool.
So I'm going to begin by purging through just a little bit of coffee in my burrs that are spinning already.
Perfect. And just a reminder to anyone, if you're tuning in.
I'm sorry, this thing is so loud.
Yeah, you're good. I guess it's a good thing if a coffee grinder is loud. Like, it's part of the satisfaction. It's like reverse ASMR.
Yeah.
Just a reminder to anyone that actually is maybe coming in a little late, please feel free to ask Matt, our head roaster, questions. I'm just kind of the MC here today, making sure that everything's running smoothly. But any and every question coffee related, until we get to the actual adding the water, where it is a little bit more time sensitive, we would love to stop what we're doing and answer. Well, Matt would. I don't think I'm qualified actually to answer.
You're
any
welcome
questions.
to try, and I'm happy to correct you.
Yeah, I'll answer questions.
I would love it.
To the best of my ability, and Matt will tell me that I'm wrong. So if you want to ask questions to Kelly, just at me in the chat, and we'll get to it. All right. So right now he's actually grinding.
There tends to be a little bit of static with coffee. I tap as much of it off with a little bit of moisture before they put it through the grinder. It's a choice. I personally don't do it, but it does have a tendency to reduce the static that holds onto the coffee quite a bit, actually. So it's something to maybe play around with, even for your pour overs. That's kind of a cool little trick.
I'm gonna try it when I get home. When I come over and we hang out tonight.
It's great to have a significant effect on the shot itself more so than a pour over. The ratio is just so sensitive because of the high pressure and high temperature of the environment. All right, we got 2 more.
I brought some food here. Do you want any? I've got Go-Gurt. I've got an Anjou pear.
Anjou, I believe.
Anjou pear.
You know, I actually, so a part of cupping is keeping your palate as clean as possible.
Right.
So the same way that we avoid dipping our spoon in other things, I avoid eating foods for a couple hours.
Yeah,
This
for
is
sure.
morning time is actually great if you can handle it. You can do it before you have breakfast and just drink some water. Try to avoid coffee as well, having coffee earlier. But definitely drink some water right before you cup and get your palate as cleansed as possible. Brushing your teeth also has a really significant impact on your perception because the mint oil they put in those can really linger. So maybe if you can handle doing it afterwards, you'll probably want to anyway.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any breakfast. I just kind of came here.
Well, you're just
started this live
along for
stream.
the ride, Kelly. So you can tell me, maybe we can see how that
How that
pear
influences
tastes.
things. Yeah. And as Matt is grinding, again, if anyone has any questions in the actual chat, like, please drop it. I had to pay a lot of money to get him off of our roaster and into this live stream. So we need to use him. This time is valuable.
I'm nervously watching the roaster behind me as Harry operates it.
Someone said, gonna be just a bit of time. I'm using a hand grinder.
Oh my. Well, you really did that to yourself, didn't you? So my water's still going. We can hold off for a couple more minutes if anyone has any other questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, I'll ask.
Kelly, I have one more for you. I still have to grind. I forgot about, so I'll get going on that.
Please grind me. So for this specific, I've got a question related while we're waiting for this person to painstakingly hand grind their coffee.
I'm sorry, this is so loud. Can you repeat the question?
No, it's fine. I'm sure at home, I'm sure they don't. It's not blasting through their speakers. I think it's fine.
Okay.
So this is our spring blend, and after this cupping today, we'll have a pretty good sense of tasting notes. When do you think this will be coming out? I know everyone in here has an exclusive sample, but...
Yeah, so I think we'll be premiering this probably in the next 7 days.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be
7
getting it on.
days.
So it shouldn't be too long, but you guys got it about a week, a little over a week early.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right.
Oh, I just want to let you know, I didn't have enough time to actually put the timer countdown on the interface, so we will have to go old school and use the timer on our phone.
That's no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will have it right here. So, they're grinding their coffee. We can go ahead and start smelling the ground coffee because
perfect.
the second you
one for
grind
me?
it, things are changing. So I have a technique. Sorry, go ahead.
There's one of these for me.
This is here for you, right there, buddy.
Thank you.
So I have a technique that I use where the aromatics get kind of. I use the air of my palm to make a seal on the top of the cup, and that pushes the air down through the coffee grounds, and then it circles around and comes back up to my nose. So presumably there's some aromatics, some invisible volatile aromatics sitting in this cup that we don't want to disturb until we get up close to our face. So the technique is to disturb the coffee with the air and release the grounds. And then as I'm smelling, I'm thinking about the smells, as was observed earlier, the chocolate, the caramel. I also try to breathe in simultaneously through my nose and my mouth. It seems counterintuitive, but you're actually, by doing so, you're diluting the aromatics in your sinuses with less air than if you just breathe only through your nose. So air is coming in through both channels, but the aromatics are only coming in through one, whereas if you breathed in at the same rate, you would be pulling in twice the volume, or maybe not twice the volume, but certainly more volume of air through your sinuses, the dilution of those aromatics will affect your ability to smell them. So I breathe with my mouth open. Breathe in gently. And again, for each cup, hopefully they're uniform across all three, but if they weren't, that would be something to note. I'm going to be holding off from telling you guys what I'm tasting. In the meantime, generally speaking, we try to avoid influencing each other, making this as blind as possible. We can talk about it once everyone has their opinions and have evaluated. We're ready to do our reveal. This would be a good time. You pull out your notes and we can talk about it. Yeah. We might taste different things. We likely will. You know, the vocabulary you have around your olfactory system and your tastes are very dependent on your memories, and so some things just won't make sense to you that make sense to me, and vice versa. It's not wrong. It's just different, and that's cool. I like that. We can talk about it, like why we tasted that differently, and oftentimes you can reconcile that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I was about to just blurt out the first thing that I smelled. So I'm glad that you.
Yes, I'm glad I caught you there.
Yeah.
Very good. How are we doing on that that hand grinder?
The hand grinder just in the chat said they're all done with grinding. Smells good.
Great. Okay. Take a minute to whiff. My water is pretty much boiled. Does everyone look like they're ready to go with regard to that?
Yeah.
So don't pour just yet.
This is a crucial step in this process, so let us know. Just give us an A-OK in the chat that your water is boiled up and ready to go. Because once you pour the water in, how much time is it? Like 5 minutes?
4 minutes. 4 minutes for diffusion of the coffee solubles, yes.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you are starting this around the exact same time that we are. So just drop an OK in the chat. Someone said I'm ready.
Okay.
So that's one.
And then make sure you have a timer too, because obviously you won't be pouring at the exact same time as me. And you want to, the second you pour onto the first cup, you want to start your timer. Okay. And we'll be waiting 4 minutes for the diffusion of the solubles into the water. And then once we hit 4 minutes, we'll start where you started and go in sequence as your pours.
Okay. Give me just 1 sec. I'm going to get these overlays set up.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of what the best. I've got so many cameras here. This is terrible for my ADD.
No, it's fine. All right, I'm going to get my stopwatch ready to go.
All right. I'm going to switch to the overhead cam just so people can kind of see the rate. I'm going to move the side cam we have a little bit closer. So if you are concerned about like the rate at which you should pour, hopefully both of these cameras will kind of give you a tip-off of what.
So pouring is a contentious issue. I think, so coffee is extracted in 2 ways primarily. Through diffusion of solubles into an energetic medium as water, and then advection, which is the liquid equivalent of convection. So solubles diffuse to concentration in the cavities of the coffee grinds themselves. Once they reach that saturation, the diffusion starts to taper off rapidly, and then advection currents draw the solubles away and put in fresh water and fresh energy and increase the diffusion. So point being, agitation is extremely crucial for higher extractions. It's not the most important that you be extremely highly extracted in your coffee. It's most important that you do it in a consistent fashion. So I say whatever you choose to use to pour and however you choose to pour it, do it as consistently as possible from cup to cup. That's all.
Yep. Well said. Okay, we got a bunch of AOKs in the chat.
Okay, great.
6 out of 7 people, so I think that that's good enough.
Okay, great. Yeah. Now, I said that you guys can use a scale to measure. I'm not going to, because what I have done is take the ratio of coffee to water already and established that the coffee to surface tension, the water to surface tension is the appropriate ratio for coffee to water for me. So that's why I'm not doing that, but I would encourage you guys, if you don't have that established, that you would just simply use a grinder just like you would a pour over. Right. Or sorry, a scale like you would a pour over. All right, I'm
And
gonna
this is crucial because all
pour over a couple grams, but aiming for that target is important. Otherwise, you just don't know how consistent you are.
yeah. I put my cup right here. I really don't want to throw off your jam here, but I would love to
I
at
got
least
you,
have
Kelly.
one cup.
Done and done.
All right, so I'm
I
gonna
like to
switch
use
over.
I like to use as hot a water as possible just to maximize extraction.
Cool.
With really dark roasts, you might not want to do that. It might become cloying and rich, but this is a medium light coffee, and really the hotter the water, the better, even for pour overs. All right, my water is a rolling boil, so I'm gonna pull it off, get my timer going now, and pour. Making sure to saturate all the grounds and come to surface tension.
Boom. Got one down.
It splashed a little. That's part of why we use multiple cups. Great, okay. So diffusion has begun. We've got about 4 minutes to wait on that, but now's a really great opportunity. You can start, we've introduced a bunch of heat energy, and obviously there's some chemical reactions going on in there, and things are going to be volatilizing and atomizing out of there. So let's go ahead and take a whiff. Kelly, I'll move yours closer to you where you can more easily smell that.
Thank you.
So I'm just gonna start smelling. I'm gonna bring my nose down to it now. And again, the technique where I breathe gently in through both my nose and my mouth simultaneously to maximize the ratio of air to aromatics. Okay, so this would be a time to, they're hiding behind you somewhere where you were off camera.
Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your pets, because they're not going to tell anyone unless you have one of those like talking pet
Yeah,
situations.
macaw, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well.
How are we doing? We have about 2 more minutes on my end. Does anyone have any questions while we wait?
Yeah. Someone ask a question so I don't have to pull from my list of generic questions. Now, Matthew is. How long have you been roasting?
I've been roasting for. Let's see. I started in 2011.
In physics?
Yeah, well, what coffee really brought out was an interest in organic chemistry, which I had hated prior to that.
Really?
Yeah, so I fun.
Yeah.
But really great set of software they have for
That's
autodidactic
actually
education.
what my master's thesis was about. Like a huge portion of it.
That's
was
right. I
talking
forgot about that.
Khan
Yeah.
Academy, Yeah.
Yeah. But there's so much great information, and you don't have to just seek it out from within the coffee industry. I think some of the most insightful revelations I've ever had have been from just reading scientific research or reading published papers, finding the overlap that people haven't already found. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And that can come from outside of the industry, for sure. People who just are hobbyists
I agree.
can tell the pros.
I agree. I mean, Isaac Newton would agree with you. Although he was in
Well,
kind
he
of
would-
in the industry. He was
I don't know
paid by
if you
the
would
Academy.
tell him an outsider in this industry.
But, same concept.
Sure.
Just some romanticizing it just a little bit.
All right, we're at 3 minutes and 33 seconds over here. Right at 4 minutes, I'm going to take, I had pre-poured some hot water into this cup. My spoon has been sitting in it, and it's going to be ready to go.
Perfect.
All right, in about 10 seconds. So obviously you want to go in sequence because you started at 4 minutes right here, so the goal is you can smell it. So what we're doing is we're breaking through the crust of coffee that has built up on the surface of the coffee, and underneath that is tons of trapped aromatics. So this is the best aromatic whiff you're going to get throughout the whole process. The rest will be mostly tasting and retronasal, and I'm going to go right for it. So I gently break the crust with my nose right above it.
And pay attention to this technique. There's not a way to get the I tried to get
It's most important that you be consistent, not so much that how you do it, and try to avoid digging the spoon too far into the coffee grounds that have settled at the bottom of the cup. That would increase agitation and cause a spike in extraction that might change the coffee over time. So it's very common that at the beginning of a cupping session, when the water's hot and the coffee is extracting, you tend to smell deeper, earthier flavors. And as the coffee cools down, different kinds of things will start to come to the forefront. We generally see those more delicate, floral, fruity, citrusy notes more on the back end of the cup. So now that we've smelled that big punch of trapped aromatics, the next thing to do is to just clean off the surface of the coffee grounds. This is how I've always seen it done in the industry. There's a little bit of a trick to it, but it's kind of fun. You take 2 of the cupping spoons and you've rinsed them as best you can. Obviously this water does get a little dirty, so we will replenish it.
Do you need me to get you some more?
No, we have enough left in the kettle. You take the spoons overlapping, like so, pushed against each other, and start them on the back of the cup, and then you, keeping them pushed together, expand them to the edge of the cup, and then take your right spoon and scoop everything onto it, getting all of the scum off of it. Kelly, can you... Scummy scum. We're skimming the scum here, guys. Yeah, scum skimmers.
My favorite part.
And we'll rinse that. And you can see that really did a pretty good job of getting everything off the surface. It's not a big deal if you have to do it more than once. Yeah. It's nice to get practiced at it when you do it a lot, because you might have 150 cups on a single table, 5 cups of the same coffee of different coffees, and you just want to be able to do it fast. It's really satisfying when you get good at it. Rinse, shake off, and the last one. Oh wait, I gotta take care of Kelly's still. Are you guys able to do it? What? Have you been able to skim the scum efficiently with this technique?
I haven't even checked the chat.
I'm curious.
How's the scum skimming going for y'all? Matt's gonna skim. Matt's gonna skim my scum.
I've already done it.
Oh, you already skimmed
Your scum
it?
is skimmed.
I stepped away for a few seconds, and you're skimming my scum like that?
You know, you get in a row, and like I said, like that's why, because you get the technique down, you just start doing it, because you might have like 100 of them on a table. So now that I've skimmed the scum, this cup just can go off to the side.
Perfect.
And then I might actually like to get some clean water, put into one of these guys. I have a larger cup I can just dump this into really quick.
Beautiful. Beautiful technique, sir.
And then we can take some of the hot water. This water doesn't need to be so hot. Pour it back in. And you would be doing this for each individual coffee. It just gets dirty enough after this point that you want to be able to rinse the coffee, the spoons appropriately. So we're at about 8.5 minutes right now. I generally like to start sipping the coffee at around 12 to 15 minutes once it's cooled to an appropriate temperature to be, you're essentially spraying it all over your mouth. So if it's hot, that sucks. You might burn your mouth. It's not, you might affect your palate because your taste buds are a little irritated, not paying it and not focusing on what they're tasting. So we got a couple minutes.
Cool. How much? 10 minutes?
When we're at about, so we're maybe in about 5 minutes. We'll go ahead and start evaluating. Again, you can smell the coffee. You know, now that everything's cleared away and the coffee is beginning to cool a little bit, you might start to smell a change. You might start to smell more subtle, delicate things in the coffee. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of a whiff.
Okay. And the technique here with the hands behind the back, is that...
Because it's just awkward. It's weird to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want to be...
Okay.
There might be people around you. I don't know. You can... I'll go down here. It's your choice. I don't care.
Okay. Just clarifying.
You can put them on your knees if that's more your speed. I don't care. I find it easier to to bow down to the coffee.
Good. Yeah, it is very appropriate to take a bow
I think so.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
to allow to show respect.
Out
to
of
the
respect.
coffee.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay, we have a couple more minutes. Do you want to, Kelly, have you whiffed your...
Yeah. Oh no, I should probably
Take a
whiff
whiff,
it. Hold
man.
on.
You can have your spoon back also.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Zip it.
Do what?
Zip the lip. Don't say it. I know, the impulse is to speak.
Let's get some more Tic Tacs.
It's a lot of Tic Tacs, man.
Get into it.
Didn't you already have a thing of Tic Tacs earlier?
Well, actually, I had Tic Tacs and
I would not recommend Tic Tacs as a palate cleanser, just by the way.
I had Tic Tacs and then I ate an Anjou pear, and that obviously is going to interfere with my palate.
Did you
so then I
forget?
ate
You
more.
forget your breakfast this morning?
Yeah, yeah. And so because just to avoid any issues with my
Mhm.
palate, I just went ahead and ate some more Tic Tacs.
I don't recommend anything he's doing, just FYI.
Well, we'll see. We'll see when the final tasting notes come along. You know, who's the
Fair
real,
enough. Yeah, who is closest to you guys?
Yeah.
All right, I'm at 11 and a half minutes. I have a pretty asbestos-y mouth, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot. But 15 is a pretty safe number. So you guys can get a chance to kind of scope the technique before you do it yourself. I gently draw in a small amount of liquid onto the spoon and bring it up to my mouth. Once it reaches my mouth, I'm going to put the spoon on the tip of my lips and then slurp the coffee in to my mouth while I simultaneously lift the handle of the spoon up. That will gently draw the coffee into my mouth, and ideally the slurp will cause the coffee to coat my palate uniformly and to atomize some of the coffee molecules and volatiles that will allow me to more efficiently smell and taste simultaneously. So here we go. If you did it right, it makes a little bit of a noise. The temperature on my coffee is pretty comfortable for me at about 12 and a half minutes. I would say you guys could probably consider trying it at that point. It's a quick motion. The time it takes to slurp is the time it takes for you to lift it up. You can definitely make yourself hack a little bit. But once you get in the flow of it and you stop thinking about it as much, it's much easier. It's one of those things that's, when you do it deliberately, it's always hard. I've been doing this for 15 years, and demonstrating it still is awkward. But also, it's important now, we can start thinking about what this coffee tastes like. So before, the aromatics were, or what we were perceiving had a tendency to be more on the earthy side of things. You might start seeing that transition to some more delicate, interesting things as you're tasting it. Also, you know, from your stomach, compounds change and volatilize and come back up through your esophagus into your olfactory system, and you will retronasally olfact them and smell them. So the concentration of aromatics will kind of increase as you do this process over time.
I'm gonna take a slurp.
Take a slurp. I'm going to continue slurping through these. This is something, if I had multiple cups on the table, I would go through all of them at once, and then I would do it again. And then when things kind of confounded me or weren't coming to me immediately, I would stop and go through all of them again until I really kind of honed in on what it was that I was experiencing. You know, obviously these are aromatics that allude to things that we've experienced in our life. But some of the chemical compounds are identical. Malic acid is an acid that's found in coffee. It's also the defining acid of apples. Phosphoric acid has a tendency to be in more purple fruits. Quinic acid gives just a pleasant tart sweetness. Lactic acid is a really large molecule and gives like a deep, rich flavor, but also its molecular size affects the tactile sensation of the coffee on our mouth. It's very large, and these large lactic acid molecules literally roll on the surface of your taste buds and feel smoother. There's so much interesting things that happen with that, like the mechanical nature of the molecules, the way that they volatilize, the concentration of the volatilization. All of these things affect your experience of it. All of it, everything that comes to mind is valid. It's okay. Like, get weird about it. It happens. Like, there's an amazing amount of overlap in the way that chemicals in our foods work, and coffee just happens to be particularly chemically complex, and that's why we taste such interesting things on the tasting notes when we do this for a really long time, and we have a really expansive vocabulary around it. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I ran over to throw away my Go-Gurt, but were you kind of doing the musician analogy? Did I miss that?
No, yeah, so speaking of the vocabulary, there's this analogy that I do like for people who struggle with the idea that you're tasting things in coffee. It's like you're creating a vocabulary for your sense. We look at things and we can physically describe them. We have a vocabulary for the description of things. Coffee tasting notes are a vocabulary for your olfactory system. So the analogy that I like is, as somebody who loves music but is not a musician, I hear sounds and appreciate them and enjoy them. But when I talk to a musician friend, they hear notes, they hear pitch, they hear all of these things that they have a vocabulary for that just don't make sense to me because I haven't spent the time to hone that and to make discrete observations about the way that sound works. Coffee tasting is exactly the same. I have just developed a vocabulary, I and many other professionals have developed a vocabulary surrounding this one particular sense that makes it a little more discrete and understood in a slightly different way. But essentially, it's all the same. And by practice and practice and practice, you can do that too. You don't need to be a professional. It's just professionals get so much practice at it by virtue of what they do.
Yep. And practicing could be as simple as just like maybe becoming a bit more aware of what you're tasting.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you drink a coffee, be thoughtful. The same way that we're being thoughtful about every step, if you pay attention to what you're smelling, you start to smell more things. It's like looking at a painting and seeing the little tree in the background, and you see the strokes of that tree rather than just a forest.
Yep. This is a beautiful analogy and one that I think I'm going to quote you on.
Do it.
Yeah.
Feel free.
I'm gonna write a blog for Alma,
Great.
and I'm gonna direct quote this right here.
Okay. So I'm continuing to taste the coffees. I'm trying to think about it again as they cool down, and then we're getting to about the 20-minute mark, and the coffee is really starting to hit lukewarm, and then maybe even cooler than body temperature, and that's kind of the final step. We might really do this for as long as 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to, at that point, we're just trying to make sure nothing tastes gross or weird or funky. Because if the coffee tastes in this really bare evaluative system good from start to finish, then when you brew it at home, it should be no-brainer. It should be delicious. Because I've kind of taken into consideration all possible states of the coffee. If you put your coffee in the fridge because you had some leftover in the pot, and then you pour it over ice the next day, if I tasted the coffee at 45 minutes when it was cold and it still tastes good, hopefully that second day iced coffee that you drink still tastes good. I don't care how you drink it. I want it to be as delicious as possible for you. And that's a part of this process. I'm going to take a couple more slurps. Hopefully you guys are starting to taste some more interesting things in the coffee. Some more fruitier things. The acidity of the coffee might start to show a little bit, whether the coffee is sweet or bitter or dry or papery.
Yeah, and this is probably a good time to mention too that some of the language around coffee stems from the SCA coffee tasting wheel. I know you personally don't reference it as much as maybe they advertise it to be.
Oh, it's a wonderful starting point. Kelly, are you able to pull that up?
Give me just a second. I'll pull up a little.
Yeah, no
image
problem.
of
It's kind of a wheel that branches from the center and outward, and it's a really great starting point for understanding the interrelation of flavors and kind of the hierarchy of flavors and how they work. Like I mentioned earlier, how some acids are defining of certain fruits. Well, then you might start to understand what that acid tastes like, and then you might start seeing how that acid and another sugar combined in a different way create the sensation of a different fruit on your palate that you're familiar with. So yeah, if you can do that, this is a really great reference to have up, especially if you're struggling to find a word for it. You might look at a blueberry on this sheet and be like, oh, I do actually kind of taste that, because blueberries have an acidity. They have kind of a certain type of sweetness. They have a certain tannicness from the skin that all kind of comes together in a way that I'm sort of tasting in here.
I accidentally downloaded one that was like 200 pixels by 200 pixels. But I'm trying to find a good one on Google Images. You can just go to Google and just type in like coffee tasting wheel.
So these are from the Specialty Coffee Association, SCA.coffee. They do have these resources available. I don't think they're all free, though. Unfortunately, nope. There's memberships that are required to purchase that.
Yeah, there is a paywall, and that's unfortunate, but I get it. To a degree, I get it. All right, I found one that I'm going to kind of put up right beside you, Matt.
Okay.
1 second. Okay, so let's see. This is kind of what he was referencing. Again, this is the SCA coffee wheel as of, I don't even know if this is like...
I don't think it's changed too much over time, and it doesn't really matter. The point is, it's just there as a way for you to start getting a reference point for the vocabulary of tasting coffee.
Yeah. What I like about it particularly, though, is that it stems out. It's actually a very practically designed infographic in the sense that the core tasting notes kind of start in the center of the wheel.
Absolutely, yeah,
so
and they branch out, and it helps you
So it helps you define
what you're tasting from a more generalized thing.
100%. Yeah, I've always thought that was, from a design standpoint, it is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But yeah, that's actually, I use that sometimes when you introduce a new coffee. I'll go in and just reference the coffee tasting wheel. And, 95% of the time, outside of that one time with the gooseberries, I pretty much agree with your tasting notes by following that wheel. By the way, where do people get gooseberries? I know that's in our Peruvian tasting notes.
Where do they get them? Where do you purchase them?
I literally looked.
Ethnic versa.
Yeah, I'll be sure to do that next time. That was my mistake.
Yeah, you just need to understand the ecology of the system that you're in and find out when those are going to be there.
Of course. It's my fault as the digital media manager.
It's very practical.
I didn't have foraging in my resinographic because I think that's going to help people.
Yeah, I'm kind of coming to some conclusions here. And I think shortly, I don't know if you guys are still tasting or not. Kelly, if you want to let me know on that front.
Yeah, let me know.
If you've got any notes or anything, I think I'm pretty much ready to talk about what I taste.
Okay. Cool. You're ready.
Yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and if you want to tell me what people are saying, and I can kind of come in afterwards.
Yeah, so here's how we'll do this. I think this makes the most sense because you and I are the experts, obviously.
Both of us, absolutely.
We don't want to taint or frame people's experience here by providing our tasting notes. So I think what would be really helpful in the chat is if each of you that have been participating, and thank you for joining today. This has been a really fun experience.
Thank you so much.
Maybe just drop one single tasting note at a minimum that you are experiencing in this spring blend roast. Matt was talking about fruitiness, some florally tasting notes, but anything that you experience, this is a completely subjective,
Absolutely. There's really no wrong answer.
There's no wrong
unless
answer.
you're just trying to mess with me.
Yeah. There might
be, I don't know.
Yeah. So,
Bring it
okay,
on.
we're starting to get a few
Okay.
people drop it in the chat.
Mhm.
The first person said, on the aromic/grind, definitely got orange peel and wet earth.
Okay.
Which is, I definitely got the orange peel there a little. So that's interesting. There is actually a 10-second delay on this, so every time I ask a question, we have to just kind
Okay,
of
that's fine.
wait around until
All
someone...
right. So yeah, as far as aromatics go, I agree. It felt kind of cocoa-y to me, and I honestly the sense memory that I recall is Cocoa Puffs.
Oh, wow.
And it kind of elicits a texture in my mind and a chocolatiness that doesn't have a richness from cocoa butter or a bitterness from the cacao. It's kind of processed, kind of delicate chocolatey,
Yep.
almost like a mild chocolate, but not a milk chocolate.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
Someone else in the chat, we got 11 people in here, and I know for a fact at least 7 or 8 of you are doing this at home. So, you know, you should be at least one slurp in. Please, please. The only way that we can move forward with this reveal is getting all of you to drop one thing. And thank you, Theme Parkive. It's an interesting YouTube name. I might subscribe later to your channel. I don't know what it is, but I like the sound of it. But yeah, just drop a tasting note in the chat, y'all. Theme Parkive said on the aromatic side what he got, but on the slurp side, that's what we're interested in, because I don't want to reveal what I'm tasting.
And it's all interrelated too. It's okay if you taste the same thing that you smell. Cool. That's very possible. It might change your perception of it. Like, for example, orange peel. When you start tasting it and you get a juiciness and the actual acid is perceptible, it might taste more like the combination of the two. Like maybe a little pithy, which is kind of a bitter minerally flavor, or the actual mouthfeel of the coffee might make it taste more juicy as well. You know, when you bite into an orange, there's oils on the surface of the skin that contaminate the juice or the wedge of orange in addition to the pith, and it becomes a really complex sensory experience beyond just smell and taste as well.
Yeah, agreed. We're getting a few in the chat now. So the first one's from Amanda Claire.
Okay.
She said, I'm getting berries.
Okay.
Berries in like a general sense.
Yeah, so there's a couple kind of, when berries come to mind, I think of kind of different colors of berries. There's green berries, which I imagine a little less sweet and more tart, like green, almost like green grape. And then there's red berries, which tend to be kind of delicate in flavor and sweet with a mild acidity, like mulberry or raspberry. And then there's like black, like currants or blackberries, which have a deeper, almost purple, grapey quality to them. I feel like their skin and color kind of contributes to that flavor, and they tend to have, in my mind, the least amount of acid from the perspective of berries.
Yeah. They don't have a name. Fadolin7. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Got a little bit of a smoky taste on the slurp.
Okay.
Then someone came in, Maria Dawn says, I'm not getting berries or citrus, but I just want to say that I'm not used to dark roast. So I guess she's saying she's not tasting the same thing that maybe we are.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. This is absolutely a fair bit darker than, say, our Belengalcho or the Ethiopian Cocher or the Colombia that we normally roast. So the fact that you tasted smoke, that's definitely a byproduct of roast characteristic that comes into play. And that's something that goes along with the richness, the chocolatiness, those sorts of things. It's kind of a bitter quality to it.
Here, while we're waiting, so I think some people are still typing in the chat. Do you want me to go ahead and just reveal what my tasting notes
Yeah, go
were?
ahead, Kelly.
Okay, so just don't let this skew your data, everyone. But for me, when I came in for the first slurp, I wasn't getting all of these, but it started with Anjou pear. That one was very prominent to me. And then on the second slurp, I got actually tropical Tic Tacs for some reason.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Really felt it
Wow.
in the back of my palate too. And then, actually to top it all off, in the aromatic stage, I was getting some berry Go-Gurt.
Okay.
So that
Gotcha.
one, it was really just an interesting experience. I don't know how many of those tasting notes are going to make it to the final label. I think berry Go-Gurt's fair game.
Berry Go-Gurt, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we did have someone else taste berry, so.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, we're on the same page. I just like to draw specifically from nostalgic memories of my youth. And that's, you know, sitting, waiting for my dad to get off work, eating Go-Gurt and watching Cartoon Network. So, um, let's see. Anyone else in here with some tasting notes? It doesn't look like
I'm happy
it.
to go ahead and say, yeah, what I tasted. So, uh,
Wait, hold on.
oh, okay.
Oh, someone said they didn't taste Go-Gurt. Well,
I noticed Kelly was snacking a little bit earlier, so that could have influenced
it might have
his
influenced
opinion.
it. Oh, wait,
little bit.
actually, we got a good bit here.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah,
On the
go ahead.
slurp, blackberry once it was cool, a bit of a sugar cookie or baked goods when it was mid temp, and then very cocoa-y throughout from start to finish.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you want me to reveal what your notes are,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
or do you want to elaborate on that? Because I feel like there's some y'all are in cahoots a little bit here.
Yeah. So I personally, I've kind of developed sort of a cohesive sense of sort of how I would identify all of the flavors combined: the beginning, the middle, and the end. That is the aromatics, the taste, and the cooled coffee. But cocoa, like I said, especially on the nose, it's when you pour the cocoa powder into a mug and it kind of wafts up into your nose. That's sort of the experience that I got a little bit from the coffee, and then a little bit of I actually was thinking tangerine, which is kind of it's a less acidic orange and has more of an oily quality to it. So the orange peel, absolutely, that's potato right there, and that's kind of more on the break of the crust where I started to notice the orange, and then on the palate I did notice a little bit of a lemon oil, which is just kind of the peel, but to me it's kind of like a floral quality that comes from citrus that lacks acidity or sweetness, and then there was kind of a mouth coating quality to the finish that reminded me of oil as well. So those are kind of the things I was thinking. But the berries, like berries can be minerally, and that mineral quality can sometimes overlap into pithiness. Like for example, a kumquat, which is an orange, a small citrus that you eat the whole rind on and all. It's sweet but bitter in a really pleasant way, and that's born from that slaty minerality that berries can sometimes have. So I agree that the people that are tasting smoke, these are probably people who are, like you said, unaccustomed to darker roasts. I do personally have a preference towards very light roast coffee because I just love tasting the terroir of the coffee. But I also have a lot of palate experience with coffee roasts from extremely dark to extremely light. So there is a certain, when you're coming up with tasting notes, there's a certain sense of you want to kind of try to mitigate your bias in that way, and that's why it is important for me personally as a coffee roaster who's trying to come up with tasting notes on the bag to understand that when someone reads that it's a medium light roast coffee, there's things implicit about that. So the smoke, the roastiness of it, that's kind of implicit, and I don't need to be putting that on the tasting notes from my perspective. So that's why I choose to put the other things that I taste in conjunction with that. They can also roast can modulate how, say, ripe or cooked a fruit can be. With the same coffee, so the Ethiopian kocher, when we roast it as a single origin, I roast it very light, and as a result, there's tons of citrus flavor that's overwhelmingly floral, and it almost smells like the flowers on a tree or a gardenia, and that has been kind of modulated by the degree of roast into something that is less delicate and ethereal and more tangible and juicy, into the orange, the not even like a particularly like floral tart orange, but a sweet, deep tangerine kind of orange, or orange oil. And then same, the lemon oil is kind of a crossover with that as well. Just to my mind, there's a differentiation between the florals of a lemon and an orange. That's why I selected that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say just based on this chat here, most people are kind of in agreement with your final
Cool.
tasting notes. I mean,
Does anyone disagree about anything in particular, or just kind of baffled?
yeah, I mean, someone said citrus, another person. No one said lemon oil, so I think that is specific to you. But I did taste it through the Go-Gurt, that oily.
Okay.
But the cocoa, I mean, at least 3 people in the chat all backed up the person that said that and said that they're tasting
The grain particle distribution curve, or rather how uniform the grind is and how fine or coarse it is.
Yeah.
All these can kind of modulate your personal experience. So again, that could sometimes account for the differences in our perception, and that's why, you know, we try to use the same things over and over when we do it at the roastery, so that you can at least get a sense of consistency from the tasting notes that you're getting from us. You might not agree, but at least then you get a frame of reference from which you can choose what you personally like from our selections.
Yeah, agreed. We have one final question. I think we'll sign off because
Okay.
that was all. I mean, there's no steps that we're missing here, right? I mean,
I don't think so. Yeah, and again, this is not the codified green evaluation system that we use for purchasing and importing coffees. This is a slightly modified form for us for the purpose of quality control. So I just wanted you guys to see how we do it. This is literally how I do it. I do this constantly. It's a huge part of the work that I do, and making sure that I get you guys coffees that are consistent and delicious and unrelatable as well.
Agreed. Yeah. One final question, and then we'll sign
Ask
off.
away.
We love the Soulmate blend. Did you create that?
Did I create it? No.
Yeah.
The Soulmate came before me, actually. I've been here for about a year, and that was Mr. Harry Hutchins, our owner, doing the hard work. The legendary Hutchins. He did. That's our standard, just go-to, just like perfectly balanced medium roast. And you know, the trick to the medium roast too is that as coffee farmers, importers, exporters, we change the individual lots of coffee that we use for our named blends, like Soulmate. So I think since I've started, and we've gone through 2 crops, 2 seasons now. We've started the 2021-22 arrivals from our harvest, and this Soulmate has been 10 different lots of coffee. So Soulmate it's really important for this stuff to keep Soulmate as consistent as possible. It's changing every couple months because of that, and so this process is another part of keeping the consistency from lot to lot as well. But I'm glad you guys like Soulmate. I'm really proud of how we keep that consistently delicious.
Okay, I'm going to answer this last question
Yeah.
with the sign off. Just so I don't have to walk over there, I edited my actual webcam to be right next to you.
Okay.
So it appears as
All right.
though we're standing next to each other. But someone asked, will you do this again? And that is a great question. I enjoyed doing this. I'm sure we'll do it again with some future upcoming roasts. We do have like quarterly roasts, right? So this is going to be the
So this is
spring blend.
we do seasonal roasts. We have a holiday blend, a spring blend, a summer blend, and a fall blend, and then we do a couple other special ones. But the idea will be that they change a little bit, but the essential feel of what each one is appropriate to the season. So you can always expect that from the blends.
Perfect. Yeah, so
And we would like to, feature them with cuppings like this each time.
I agree, because this was a lot smoother than I was expecting. Minus the mic issues at the beginning, but that was just me not turning the mics on, which happens sometimes in the chaos of this. But yeah, thank you, Matt, so much for taking time out of your roasting
Thank you, Kelly.
schedule.
Thank you guys for showing up and doing this with me.
Yeah, it's been great. Everyone that participated, you can look forward to this roast coming out when?
We'll hopefully have this out by the end of the week.
Okay, end of the week. And some of these tasting notes that you dropped in the chat might make their way on
We may feature
over.
your tasting notes.
Yeah, so you really did help contribute to the R&D process here at Alma Coffee. And
this is great. This is, I don't normally get customer feedback before I've even released coffee from tasting notes. So this is wonderful, and it's really gratifying to hear that you guys seem to have a pretty similar perception of the coffee to me. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, cool. Yes, to the last question, we will do this again. And then to everyone that's in this chat, if you want to know when the next one is, obviously you are on our YouTube channel right now, so just subscribe. You'll see it pop up. But also, our email newsletter is a great way to just get notified. I write all of the emails and we try not to make them very like marketing ploys. You know, I handwrite
It's a human.
them.
It's a human. It feels
It's
human.
a human behind.
Yeah,
It's me, which means sometimes
It
there's
genuinely
typos.
is.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense, and that's
Almost
the
always
fun of it.
typos, in fact.
Yeah. Well, people are saying they loved it. They can't wait to order it.
Wonderful.
And be on the
Wonderful.
lookout on our website, on our email. We will announce when this is available. And as far as the next live stream, don't know when it's going to be, but
Stay tuned.
I definitely plan
We
on
might do
doing
more
it
of these
again.
too, different things.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the options for the future.
Yeah. Anything you want to say?
I don't think so.
It's not admissible in court.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much. This was a lot more entertaining and interactive than I had anticipated it to be. So